Thank you for staying with us for this evening of solidarity with the people of Israel. And what a pleasure I have. One of the real good guys on the American Jewish scene and a dear friend is the president and CEO of the JCPA, the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, Rabbi Steve Gutow. Steve, thank you for joining us tonight.
I'm sad, but I'm pleased to be with you, Mark.
I understand. And I want you to really talk about that sadness. Can you just share with our audience, what was your own reaction and how have you been feeling, especially after we learned that the three boys were discovered and their bodies were discovered in this grave outside of this grave, in this, wherever they were buried outside of Hebron. But I'd love to have a sense, Steve, of how you've been feeling really for the last 2.5 weeks and then culminating in this last day or so.
Well, I've been nervous and upset for the last several weeks, and I've been worried. I mean, these are children. These are kids. I mean, it's just nothing that doesn't happen. But I think yesterday I became sick in my stomach. I actually had written that in a press release, and somebody on our communications team said, "Can't we just say you're torn to pieces?" And I said, if that's better communication, fine. But I am so nauseated. Yes. I don't understand a world in which this can happen.
Yes.
I don't.
Have you also been struck by the way in which there seems to be among the families an extraordinary inner strength, Steve?
No, I think there certainly has been, and I think they show it, and you feel it when you hear from them or about them. And I was talking to somebody who had spoken this morning, actually, with one of the kids' mothers, and just listening to him talk about how she was thankful and for all the support, and of course sad and miserable. But it sort of talked about who these kids would have been, because when you have mothers and fathers like these mothers and fathers, you can only imagine what the world was in store for. Only imagine what the world was in store for had these kids been allowed to grow and
of
become.
Course, yes, yes. How did you feel the American community, the American media, really? How did you feel the event was covered? There are some people who were disappointed and felt that it was not given the proper attention. What was your sense?
Look, I don't know. I mean, I certainly didn't feel it wasn't covered. I'm not analyzing journalism and how they cover everything. I know it was on the front page of the New York Times today, and up at the top actually. So I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not analyzing how to. I'm more sad than sitting here doing an analysis or trying to blame a media community that clearly did care and clearly was upset. So I don't have the answer to your question.
Okay, fair enough. As you look at this, Steve, what do you think is going to come out of it? And I've said this to some other people. When America faces some kind of crisis, when some crazy guy goes in and a lunatic shoots up an elementary school, the American people want things to change, and they want to enact laws, and they want to make it sure it never happens again. I'm asking you in general, you see this happen where 3 kids are taken off the West Bank and basically just simply murdered, and the Israeli people have to deal with that. What do you think will come of it? What would you like to see come of it, both in Israel and, Steve, really for the American Jewish community?
I think there has to be a molding of these emotions, of these deep feelings we have into a wisdom as to how can we possibly gain peace in the land we all so love.
Yes.
Because I think if we just lash out and be angry and yell, it'll be kind of like what happens in America. You know, there's weeks and weeks of we're going to do this and we're going to solve that and we're going to stop these shootings. And then it generally dissipates because it's not often looked at with great wisdom, but usually with just all that anger and emotion. So my hope is, and I don't have the answer, or I would, lay it out, as you know I do, tell you what I think, I always have. But is it the Israelis and American Jewry and everyone else we can gain to think about it, how do we best resolve this so it doesn't happen again? What are the protections we need for those kids that live in the West Bank? Or what do we need to do to prevent Hamas from, if it was Hamas, I mean, I don't know for sure that it was, but to prevent this kind of marauding and protect our children. That's what I hope. And I hope it's rational, reasonable, intelligent, but impelled and moved by these deep emotions we feel. It's hard to do that because usually the anger overtakes everything else.
Yes, that's beautifully said. And now speak of it from the American Jewish perspective. And you and I have talked about this before. There are many people who are wringing their hands and prophesying doom for the future of the American Jewish community. And they're talking about how more and more Jews are disaffected. We had a caller just a little while ago, Steve, who wanted us all to know that in Chicago, the Jewish community was not disaffected. It wasn't dwindling. There's a strong, vibrant Jewish community, and she talked about how strong she is. I believe her name was Ruth. Anyway, I want you to give me your sense now, as you, in the aftermath of this horrific event, what do you hope happens on the American Jewish scene, and to what extent are you concerned about the future of American Jewry?
Well, I'm always concerned, Mark, about the fate of American Jewry. Right. I get up in the morning concerned. I go to bed at night concerned, and I'm sure I dream about that. So that's easy. But it's a very vital, vibrant community. I was looking at the news wires. I was listening to the communities that we represent, which is a lot, and it was like a carpet of response to what happened. It was a community that came together from the very far right to the very far left and said, this is not okay, and stood up and rallied, and they're still standing up. And I went to one today almost by accident. I was walking through a building, and somebody said, why don't you come into our memorial service? And it was one organization that was having one, another one of the memorial services. So I think the community is strong together and full of a sense of trying to protect itself. I don't, it's too soon. I mean, you and I can have our talks later about what to do because those answers don't happen the day after. They happen with thoughtful reflection. Not
very wise. No, you're always very wise. One last question. Your work with the JCPA has always taken a very strong stand on behalf of those in our American community who are in need. And you've fought for people who are poor. You have fought for people who are hungry, Jew and non-Jew alike. I want a sense from you at the moment, in terms of the Jewish community you deal with, are the concerns of the JCPA still important enough to the vast majority of American Jews? Are you pleased with the social conscience of American Jewry today?
Yeah, I think it's magnificent. I mean, sometimes I wish it was more Jewish than just Jews feeling it.
Good for
sometimes
you.
I wish they could see the Jewish pieces of it.
Yes.
But as far as the numbers of Jews, as far as the percentages of Jews who seem to worry about the poor and care deeply, I think it's stunning. You can see it by numbers. It's when the Pew study came out, social justice was one of the leading reasons people wanted to be connected to the Jewish community. They wanted to be Jews. So I don't think it's dissipated. I think it's morphed a little bit. It's not, or maybe there's just a mythology that it was once very Jewish. But one of the things we do is try to find the Jewishness in the things we do and try to communicate them, because I think that's the way to both keep Judaism powerful and also keep the American social justice cause as powerful.
Nobody does it better or even as well as you. And by the way, the audience should know, Steve Gutow is also a fabulous rabbi, does fabulous teaching, and he has really taught in many, many ways the American Jewish community what it is to be passionate about social justice, but as you hear him say, also from a Jewish core. I love you very much. We have to get together very soon, Steve, and I thank you so much for going out of your way tonight. I know where you are, so it's very, very sweet of you to give me time on this evening of solidarity with the people of Israel.
I love you back, and really keep doing the wonderful work Shalom TV and you do, because you're a special figure in so many of our lives.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very, very much. Talk to you soon. Steve Gutow, who is the president and CEO of the JCPA, the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. If you're not familiar with the JCPA and you are online, go online and Google JCPA. They do fabulous work, and you might want to be involved with them if you're not already involved with them. We've talked to many people on the phone, both you, our audience, Shalom TV family, as well as a number of Jewish leaders like Steve Gutow. But right now, what a privilege I have. I'm sitting in studio with Micah Halpern, and many of you now know that Micah, who does so many things, he has his own blog, The Micah Report. He's a journalist, he's a commentator, he's an analyst. And now you do Thinking Out Loud on Shalom TV, which is thrilling for us. So Mazal Tov on your premiere of your show, which aired last night. I got many, many people telling me how very, very touched they were. I got people telling me what an important show Thinking Out Loud is, so congratulations. But I really asked you to come tonight because I wanted to hear your reaction. We talked quite often before the bodies were found that we knew for a fact that they were dead. You said yourself you did not expect them. You didn't expect good news, and you were right. I just want to hear, think out loud for me right now. What's your sense, Micah, of what you've seen and how you feel tonight, especially tonight, given everything we've encountered in the last few days?
Well, the sadness, the overall sadness, the gloom is hard to get over. And because in reality, we're all a part of those families, whether we be here in New York or in Connecticut or in California or in Jerusalem or in Nofi alone. The reality is that we're a part of the family and the community. We're a part of the community. And I think that it's worth spending a few seconds explaining what that is. In other words, it means something to us, to the people who care, to the people who are moved. And we say it as if it's commonplace, as if it's so simple that, of course, we're connected to something that happens 9,000 miles away to 3 teenagers. But it's not so obvious, and we should make that clear. We really connected to these families.
Why was that?
And it's important to go through the reasons.
Yeah.
And even things that may have happened down the street from us to 3 teenagers, we may not have connected to. So it's not a geographic issue.
Right.
And even if they were connected, even teenagers, children, all these different, we'll pull at the heartstrings for a moment or two. We'll see it on the news. But for many of us, we were literally living and breathing this experience. And the end, the ripping, the jarring, the wrenching was very dramatic when we found out that news. And we still don't know all the news. And it's that I don't know if we should tell the public all the gory details of these things.
Yeah, is it necessary?
I don't know. That's another question another time. I have chosen not to.
Okay,
up
fair
until
enough.
now.
Okay.
So that's what. But that said, we're connecting to the story because there's a connection between Jew to Jew. We talk about unity, and we just sort of throw it out there. But there's something beyond that. It's not just about. And Israel has sort of gone above. Risen above the internal disputes.
Yes.
And you saw this at the rallies. You saw people with kippot, with yarmulkes, people without, people modestly dressed and people immodestly dressed, people who were Tel Aviv characters or free spirits, and next to people who were ultra-religious. And they were all connected. And they weren't connected simply because they shared background. They were connected because they saw in these children something that connected to them. Because in reality, we are truly one people. We divide up and we fight and we often dispute, and we have problems with various issues sometimes, and sometimes to the point where we shout at one another and even get even more energetic about that. But the reality is when under threat, when in a threat specifically at our most precious commodity, our children, we realize that threat is not to a particular part of the community. It really is to the entire community. And we in America, Jews in America, relate to that. They relate to the threat that was made to the Jews of Israel by the individuals represented there, the families. And the families were so remarkably strong through this whole ordeal, connected to us as family members. And they spoke to us as family members. And that also enabled us a connection which was dramatically different than had it been an elementary school in Connecticut, which we pained. That was enormously. I'm not suggesting that it wasn't painful for us. It was, but it wasn't the same. And as much as we tried to relate to the children that were involved in that, it wasn't the same. And the difference is the Jewish connection here. And the people watching TV have to focus on that also. We have to realize that we really are different. And that's an element of the chosenness of the Jewish people.
What do you mean?
The connections that make us who we are, the things that link us to one another, make us different than other societies in the world.
Interesting.
In many ways, also that makes other people jealous of us. Also, and I don't want to focus only on the good, because after all, this was a horrific thing, and I wish it didn't happen at all. But there are some elements that came out of that.
I want to pose the question. I'll catch you, but I want to pose the question that way. I want to know whether we are desperately searching for some good in what is virtually a senseless, horrific act. And as I listen to you, I'm saying to myself, look at all the good that Micah is describing. In some ironic way, did this horror have, was there meaning to it, so that although we wish it never had happened, it goes without saying, it should never have happened, that somehow the Jewish people are better off because of it?
Oh, I didn't say that. Goodness, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I mean, there's a long-standing question in theology and in philosophy about eschatology and the concept and the notion of the future and whether or not bad happens because of good and all these different kinds of things. And the reality is that in the way in which we understand good versus evil, and this is found in the prophets itself also, and it's a Jewish tradition, that indeed that good needs to respond to evil. It needs to respond to evil. And there's a concept there, and I don't know that our viewers want to get too deep into this, but I think it's an important consideration. But good exists, and good conflicts with and must respond to the evil elements that emerge. And that said, I hope becomes victorious.
Yes.
Now, that's also an element of hope. One of the things that we saw in this whole story, and the stories of these three angels for all intents and purposes, is that the hope that we had, even though it was clear to me from the very outset what the end was, and I told you that and even said it on air, it was very clear that if they were amateurs, the boys were dead immediately. And actually, there was the release of the equivalent of the 9/11 call today, and if your viewers haven't heard it, they should listen to it. It's in Hebrew. It is very audible, where the young boy says, it's Gilad, he says, they have kidnapped us. I'm translating it properly. Chotfu, they've kidnapped me. And it's very, very clear. And then you hear the two kidnappers shouting to the boys, put your heads down, put your heads down, put your heads down. Two different voices. And then the police are saying, hello, 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 and then it's very clear. So what happens though is you have this evil in the midst of this. You have the evil, but hope still emerged. Hope was there for that family. Hope is around them. You see the coverage of it, and how they can remain hopeful. Rachel Frankel says, we're going to have to learn to sing without you. because Naftali was a beautiful singer and they sang around, they were singers. We're going to have to learn to sing without you. That's...
Breaks one's heart, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's really powerful.
Very powerful, very powerful. Yes, and I don't want our audience to misunderstand. I was not suggesting that you were saying somehow this was a good thing. I'm only saying that in some way, even horrific events can be used by good people in good ways. And that's, I think, what you were saying.
Yes.
You know, it reminds me, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, there was pure evil when there were human beings who thought it was appropriate to fly airplanes into a World Trade Center and kill 3,000 people. However, for me, that event simply showed an avalanche of good. There was extraordinary outpouring of people who did selfless things to try to save other people and who were just in the depths as human as they could ever be. And in some way, on a smaller level, what you're saying is here you had a horrific event. And yet the people of Israel and the Jewish people as a whole, we here in America.
Those who wanted to connect with it.
Yes.
Those who had the vehicle to connect.
Yes.
And to connect in a way that has been almost unparalleled for a very, very long time.
What about it makes you angry?
Well, a lot of it makes me angry.
Yeah, I know. What about it? But you should share just some, because you have very important insights. What makes you angry?
Some of the things that make me angry is that that it seems very clear from the outset that this was Hamas. And even to couch it in the way where one needs to create a trial in order to convict them. In this day and age of terror, it should be clear to recognize that the people who are doing evil sometimes claim it, sometimes they don't. But when all evidence goes in this direction, you don't need beyond reasonable doubt. And this is not a court case. And that's what happens. With all due respect to Rabbi Gutow, that was a mistake that he made. He said, quote, "We don't even know if it really was Hamas. We know it was Hamas. And the United States knows it was Hamas. And the Palestinian Authority knows it was Hamas." Actually, their security services made certain that Israel knew that these characters that were involved were Hamas. And that's important to see. We don't need to be fair about this. We don't want to be fair about this. And that goes to the coverage also. And I want that to be clear also. The coverage was not good at the beginning. As it started becoming clearer and clearer, it became more and more of a story. But it had to gain some momentum. And that frustrated me. It really did. The idea that, let's say, the statement of the White House yesterday, in the aftermath from Josh Earnest, the spokesperson of the White House, actually said, he said, "We condemn all violence." Violence. He called this violence. Violence is when someone breaks your window, okay? Violence is when someone threatens you. You might get roughed up a little bit. Violence is not a brutal terrorist attack that murders 3 teenagers. That needs to be called murder and terrorism. That's not simply violence, okay? And then he said, against civilians. Yes, they were civilians. They were kids. They were children. They were high school kids. This is different. Calling them civilians, that really irritates me to the point where I went all over yesterday after I heard this, sending messages across the world in order to make certain that the next time someone makes a comment like this, they didn't say civilians and violence. Because that to me, and believe these are wordsmiths. These are people who understand words. Now, were they trying to avoid,
by accident?
Right. Were they trying to do something deliberate here? They deliberately de-emphasized the humanity of the situation.
Or the inhumanity.
And the inhumanity.
Right.
On both the humanity of the victims
Yes.
and the inhumanity of the perpetrators.
Yes.
And that, to me, is enraging. As much as the Holocaust was. That's what I'm saying. That's how deeply disturbing that is. Do you understand what I'm saying here?
100%, and you say it perfectly, and I've tried to say it, but you say it better. Our audience is going to hear you, and they're going to have one question in their mind, and so you have to answer it. Is it a function of either latent or explicit anti-Semitism?
I have to sit back to answer that question. Normally I sit forward when I answer your questions. I have to say that's a difficult question to answer. And
many Jews think it is.
Yes, and I try not to swallow hook, line, and sinker.
Then give me an alternative explanation.
I'm going to say several elements with regard to this. we live in America, which is the freest society that Jews have ever lived in history. And yet there is a lingering tone of anti-Semitism exists that often is couched in an anti-Israel mentality.
Yes.
And I understand that also. And so I'm paying tribute to I'm not suggesting that the argument is false. What I'm saying is that there are real anti-Semites out there also, and we shouldn't combine and overlap the two. There are people who really despise Jews, and Israel. And then there are people who find reasons to be ultra-fair when it comes to Jews. And ultra-fair means giving Hamas the benefit of the doubt. I'm sorry, they don't get the benefit of the doubt. All right, and I'm not an extremist, you know that.
I know it very well.
This is not a group of people that you have to even the playing field for. All right, and that's the argument that goes on when the White House makes their comments like this, or when serious Jewish professionals, so the same way, maybe it's not Hamas. We're not about evening the playing field. The whole reason why we're connecting to this topic is because we love the Jewish people. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm saying that leaving the playing field is fundamentally unfair, because you need to be able to determine in this day and age, good versus bad. And if Hamas is not called bad.
Thank you, Micah. Can you stay a bit? Okay, very, very good. Sloan, let's take a very brief break. When we come back, more phone calls. Please stay with us for this evening of solidarity for the State of Israel.